For someone like you, if someone took the time, and I believe they can, to try and replicate your profile in terms of, number of followers, they could buy followers, for example, go through and make their Twitter, copy your tweets for X amount of months, and then pay for a blue tick. Is that something that worries you at all?
Yeah, quite a bit. And in fact, I believe we have entities like this.
Mm,
Ed Krasenstein and his brother.
okay.
Um, these guys, I don't know what the story is. I haven't followed them carefully. I haven't followed them at all, frankly, but I did notice they suddenly showed up in my timeline just nonstop. And I was like,
Mm,
who are these people? And then I looked at their accounts and, oh, they're huge numbers of followers. How don't I know who this person is? And then there's some sordid story where they bought accounts that were already popular that had nothing to do with them. And I don't know what it is, but it all feels very inorganic. And of course, the blue check mark can be thrown onto any account now
yeah.
just by buying it. So, in my opinion, what we really should be doing is there should be a blue check mark or some check mark. That blue check mark should be only a hallmark that your identity has been established by Twitter, that they know who you are, and that you are not going to be able to make multiple accounts. To the extent that you do something awful, your reputation should follow you, right? And so it shouldn't carry any connotation. I mean, the irony here is you can look at Heather in my account. Okay, I do have, I think it's 900,000 something followers. Um, Heather has, I don't know, is it 300,000, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, part of that may be downstream of the fact that I got in just under the wire, right? Right after Evergreen happened, my account, I literally had 400 followers when Evergreen happened, right? I had abandoned Twitter. I'd walked away. It felt like talking into a void, right? So I had 400 followers. Evergreen happened, and suddenly, I think it was like a week, I was at 30,000, right? And so it was like, oh boy, this is now something, you got to be careful with. You can get yourself in trouble if you got a lot of followers. But anyway, I applied for verification, and Twitter at the time was still, there was some vestige of its initial purpose for blue checks, which was to establish that you are who you say you are if you are an account that is something somebody might impersonate, right? So anyway, if you were notable and you could establish who you were, they would give you a blue check mark, or that's what they said. And in my case, that's what they did, even though they later put their thumb on the scales and interrupted my ability to reach people. At the time that I got my blue check, they hadn't yet decided I was an enemy. Heather applied shortly thereafter and was told that they had suspended the program. They weren't verifying anybody because it had become a hallmark of, it had become a sanction. It had become a mark of Twitter having declared you legitimate and important, right? It was a badge of honor somehow. And so Twitter said it didn't like this. But then in the years that it was suspended, that you couldn't get a blue check mark, no matter who the hell you were, right? They gave them out, and they gave them out to all kinds of people. They gave them out. There was a friend of mine unearthed one case in which they had given one to a CCP shill with, I think, under 1,000 followers. Absolutely not noteworthy. Absolutely not what it said it was. It was the opposite of what Twitter claimed that this should be. And so anyway, their behavior in that period where they did not have a official program for getting validated or verified, what they did is they turned it into exactly what they claimed they didn't want it to be. It was a Twitter sanction. They refused to give it to notable people who they didn't like, and they gave it to people who weren't notable that they did like. And so it was this, schoolyard bullshit thing. But it could be that you could take the sanction aspect out of it, and you could use it purely as an indication that something is really what it says it is, that it doesn't have multiple presences that are all verified. In other words, you should be playing with your real reputation. In my opinion, we should all be we should avoid anonymity. If I were running it, I would probably not have anonymity, which makes some of my friends very upset because they're using anonymity to good ends. But I think the net impact of anonymity is very negative. But nonetheless, you could have a blue check mark that worked. The way it's set up now, you absolutely don't. It's maybe a step in the right direction, but I don't think so. I think you really need a program. I think what Elon did was he built something that you could do cheaply. And I think the problem is, if you're trying to solve the problem that a blue check mark could potentially solve, there isn't a cheap solution. You're going to need to do something that actually individually establishes the identity. And then when that happens, do you have a blue check?
Or I do not. I do not.
You do not. One thing that was true back in the days when blue checks were not something you could buy officially, that they opened a tab inside your Twitter app that allowed you to only look at activity of other verified accounts.
Yeah.
Which was obviously highly arbitrary. Heather wasn't verified, so her activity wouldn't show up, for example, and it certainly should. She's a person whose opinion ought to matter to just about anybody. But it did mean that the bots, right, the huge armies of things that try to steer conversation could be filtered out with one click, right? So a system that did that said, look, if you want some vast, unregulated sandbox of people who have figured out how to produce 1,000 accounts that all say the same thing, you can do that, but I don't want to be part of that Twitter. I'm going to go into the part of Twitter that doesn't have that, and the blue check could do that. But I do think a real verification system would have to be underneath it.